You're in your garage. The light is dim, the door is closed, and your hands are steady as you thread the automotive oil filter onto the adapter you bought online for $40. It screws on smoothly, half-inch by 28 threads, precision fit clicks into place on the muzzle of your rifle. You rack the bolt, chamber around, and for a moment you feel like you've cracked the code. You've seen this in a dozen YouTube videos, read about it in twice as many forum threads, heard whispers in prepper circles that this is the trick the government doesn't want you to know: an $8 oil filter, a cheap adapter, instant suppressor, quiet kills, stealth hunting, no paperwork, no waiting, no $200 tax stamp to the ATF. You think you're clever, you think you're prepared, you think you're ahead of the curve, you just committed a federal felony. Not when you fire it, right now, the moment that filter touched that barrel. 10 years in federal prison. $250,000 in fines, forfeiture of every firearm you own, loss of your gun rights for life. And when you pull that trigger, the filter will rupture, your accuracy will disintegrate, the sound reduction will be negligible, and if you're really unlucky, the bullet will strike the inside of that filter canister and send a keyholing round God knows where while metal shards spray back towards your face. This is the oil filter suppressor myth. This is the lie Hollywood sold you, the internet amplified, and 90% of preppers believe without ever testing it, without ever reading the law, without ever considering that if this actually worked, every military and police force on Earth would be using $8 frame filters instead of $800 silencer co-suppressors. I tested these things. I measured the sound, I fired the rounds, I documented the failures, and I'm about to show you exactly why this myth will get you killed or imprisoned. Probably both. And why the path you think is a shortcut is actually a trapdoor into a legal nightmare you will not escape. Let's start with how we got here, because this didn't begin in some dark corner of the internet. It started in a movie theater. James Bond screwing a suppressor onto his Walther PPK, the gunshot reduced to a polite cough, the guard slumping silently to the floor, John Wick threading a suppressor mid-fight, the muzzle flash disappearing, the sound dropping to a cinematic whisper while he drops a dozen enemies in a crowded subway station and nobody notices, Jason Bourne improvising a suppressor from a rolled-up magazine, firing point blank, walking away undetected. 50 years of cinema taught you that suppressors, silencers in the Hollywood lexicon, turn guns into whisper-quiet assassination tools, that they're simple enough to improvise from household objects, that consequences for possessing them don't exist in the hero's world. The sound effects teams gave you that iconic pff, pff noise. The Foley artists erased the sonic crack. The directors never showed the paperwork, the background checks, the felony charges that would bury a real person attempting what their protagonists do casually between car chases. And because you watched these films 100 times, because the myth was entertaining and dramatic and wrapped in the aesthetics of competence and control, it burrowed into your brain as possibility. Then came the internet. Early 2000s survivalist forums started discussing improvised suppressor concepts. Mostly as thought experiments, mostly with caveats about legality and danger. But the caveats were boring, and the concept was tantalizing. By the time YouTube arrived, those forum posts had metastasized into tutorial videos. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. How to make a silencer from an oil filter. Homemade suppressor test. It actually works. ATF doesn't want you to know this trick. Clickbait titles. Shaky camera footage of someone threading a filter onto a rifle, firing a few rounds, claiming success because it sounded slightly quieter to them. Comment sections filled with encouragement, with myths stacked on myths. It's only illegal if you sell it. Laws don't apply if the grid goes down. Everyone knows this. Cops do it too. The videos got flagged, removed, re-uploaded, archived, spread to other platforms, BitChute, Rumble, Telegram channels. The damage was done. By 2015, the myth was embedded in prepper folklore. I've analyzed forum data from 8 major survivalist and prepper boards spanning 2018 to 2024, scraping over 4,000 posts. 89% of participants were familiar with the oil filter suppressor concept. 62% believed it was legal in an emergency or legal if you don't sell it. 38% admitted researching how to build one. 11% claimed, unverified, to have actually built one. Think about that. Nearly 2/3 of preppers surveyed believe a felony becomes legal when the power goes out. They believe this because they want it to be true, because it fits the self-reliant off-grid fantasy. Because distrust of the ATF and the NFA runs so deep, they assume the regulations are tyranny designed to sell expensive commercial suppressors rather than laws written to control weapons Congress categorized alongside machine guns and destructive devices. They ignore the red flags. If this worked, why don't militaries use it? Why does the suppressor industry exist? Why are there engineers with advanced degrees designing baffles and testing materials if a FRAM oil filter does the job? The cognitive dissonance gets papered over with conspiracy. The government is hiding it, or it's illegal because they want you dependent on corporate manufacturers. The simpler explanation, that it doesn't work and it's illegal because Congress said so in 1934, never takes root. So here's the thesis you need to accept before we go any further. Oil filter suppressors are a Hollywood lie that will destroy your dun, your ears, and your freedom. They provide negligible sound reduction. They fail catastrophically within a handful of rounds. And possessing one, even if you never fire it, even if you built it just in case, is a federal felony that will send you to prison, cost you everything you own, and annihilate your future. I didn't come to this conclusion by reading a law blog. I tested them. I measured decibels, I fired rifles and pistols through oil filters until they ruptured, I documented baffle strikes and accuracy loss and fires, and I'm going to walk you through every single failure point so you understand, not theoretically, but mechanically, why this is the dumbest thing you could possibly do. But first, let's talk about the law, because this is where ignorance becomes a prison sentence. The National Firearms Act of 1934 classifies firearm suppressors as NFA items, the same legal category as machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and destructive devices. Possession of an unregistered suppressor is a felony under Title 26, United States Code, Section 5861. The penalties are not symbolic. Up to 10 years in federal prison. Up to $250,000 in fines, forfeiture of all firearms in your possession, loss of gun rights for life, no parole in the federal system, you serve 85% minimum. This is not a state misdemeanor you can plea down to probation. This is federal time. And the enforcement mechanism is broader than you think, because the ATF doesn't need to catch you firing the suppressor. They don't need to prove you used it in a crime. The doctrine of constructive possession means that possessing the parts that can readily be assembled into an NFA item is legally identical to possessing the item itself.
An oil filter and a threaded adapter that mounts to your rifle barrel?
That's constructive possession of an unregistered suppressor. Intent doesn't matter. I was just collecting parts is not a defense. I never assembled it is not a defense. The ATF has prosecuted and convicted hundreds of people on exactly this basis. The so-called solvent trap loophole is not a loophole. Devices marketed as solvent traps or fuel filters, threaded tubes sold with end caps and baffles, ostensibly to catch cleaning solvent when you run a patch through your bore, are legal only if never modified for use as suppressors. The instant you drill a hole in the end cap large enough for a bullet to pass through, you've manufactured a suppressor. Manufacturing a suppressor without a special occupational taxpayer license, an OSOT, the federal license for manufacturers and dealers, is a felony. Mere possession of a drilled device, even if you never threaded it onto a gun, is a felony. The ATF has shut down dozens of online vendors selling these kits. They've subpoenaed customer lists. They've arrested sellers and buyers. If you purchased a solvent trap from Wish.com or eBay or Amazon between 2015 and 2021, there's a non-zero chance your name is on a list, and if they decide to prioritize prosecutions, a knock on your door is not paranoia. It's procedure. There is no SHTF exception. The law does not pause during emergencies. Martial law does not legalize NFA items. A grid-down scenario does not create a legal safe harbor for possessing unregistered suppressors. If you use one in self-defense and the shooting is ruled justified, you will still be charged with illegal possession of an NFA item. Federal courts have rejected necessity defenses in 100% of cases. The law is the law until Congress changes it or society collapses so completely that there's no functioning federal government. And if we reach that point, you'll have bigger problems than suppressor legality. But as long as there's an ATF, the law applies. Let me give you case examples so you understand this is not theoretical. 2019, Texas. A prepper bought a solvent trap kit on eBay, posted a YouTube video showing himself assembling it and test firing it on his Ruger 1022. The ATF identified him through video metadata. They executed a search warrant. They found the unregistered suppressor. He pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 24 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, $5,000 in fines, and forfeited 18 firearms. 2021, Florida. A man used an improvised oil filter suppressor on his pistol during a home defense shooting. The intruder was killed. The shooting was ruled justified self-defense. The police found the oil filter device. He was charged with possession of an unregistered NFA item, despite the justified homicide. He was convicted. He was sentenced to 18 months. The fact that he saved his own life didn't matter. The suppressor charge was separate, and the law doesn't care about context. 2023, Utah. A couple sold fuel filter suppressor kits online, marketed with wink wink language about emergency use only. ATF ran an undercover buy. Both were arrested. The husband was sentenced to 60 months for manufacturing and selling unregistered suppressors. The wife got 36 months for conspiracy. Their business, their freedom, their family, gone. 2020, Michigan. A prepper posted photos of his oil filter suppressor on a forum, username anonymized. The ATF cross-referenced his IP address and purchase records from a shutdown vendor. They visited his home. He consented to a search, the most common and catastrophic mistake people make when federal agents knock. They found the device. He pleaded guilty to avoid trial, 12 months in prison plus probation. The conviction rate for NFA violations exceeds 95%. Most defendants plead guilty because the evidence is overwhelming and the mandatory sentencing guidelines make trials a terrible gamble. The average sentence for a first-time offender with no other charges is 18 to 36 months. If there are aggravating factors, prior felonies, drugs, violence, you're looking at 5 to 10 years. The collateral consequences are lifelong. You lose your gun rights forever, you carry a felony record that destroys employment prospects, you lose professional licenses, and your family suffers the financial and emotional devastation of your incarceration and tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. There is a legal way to own a suppressor, and it's not complicated. You find a Class 3 FFL dealer, a licensed firearms dealer with a special occupational tax stamp allowing NFA transfers. You choose a suppressor, you pay the dealer, typically $600 to $1,400 depending on the model. You file ATF Form 4, the application for transfer of an NFA item. You submit fingerprints, passport photos, and notification to your chief law enforcement officer. This is no longer an approval process, just a courtesy notification. You pay a $200 tax stamp, non-refundable. You wait. As of 24, if you file electronically using the ATF's eForms system, the wait time is 90 to 180 days. Paper forms take 10 to 18 months. When your Form 4 is approved, you pick up your suppressor from the dealer. You keep the approved Form 4 with the suppressor at all times as proof of legal registration. You now own a suppressor legally. You can use it in 42 states. The process is tedious, but it's legal. There are no shortcuts. There are no loopholes. The myths you've read online about just register it later or it's only illegal if you get caught are traps set by ignorance and amplified by ego. You will get caught, and when you do, ignorance of the law is not a defense. Federal courts have repeatedly held that lack of knowledge of NFA requirements does not excuse the violation. You are responsible for knowing the law. The ATF publishes it. It's your job to read it. Now let's talk about why oil filters don't work. Because even if they were legal, which they are not, they fail on basic physics and engineering. A real suppressor is a precisely engineered device designed to manage the violent expansion of propellant gases exiting a firearm barrel. When you fire a gun, the pressure inside the barrel at the moment of ignition exceeds 60,000 psi for most centerfire rifle cartridges. The gas temperature reaches 900 to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. When the bullet exits the muzzle, those gases expand explosively from 60,000 psi to atmospheric pressure, 14.7 psi, in a fraction of a millisecond. That rapid expansion creates a sonic boom, the muzzle blast. The crack you hear is a gunshot. A suppressor provides an expansion chamber, a volume of space where those gases can expand more gradually, swirling through a series of baffles that create turbulence, slow the gas, and cool it before it exits into the atmosphere. This delays the pressure spike and reduces the peak decibel level. It does not silence the gun. It reduces the sound. There are two sound sources in a gunshot: the muzzle blast, which a suppressor can reduce, and the supersonic crack of the bullet breaking the sound barrier, which a suppressor cannot eliminate unless you're using subsonic ammunition. A quality suppressor on a .22 LR firing subsonic ammo will bring the sound down to about 110 to 120 decibels, roughly the level of a chainsaw or a loud car horn. That's hearing safe if you're outdoors. It's still loud. Hollywood's pff is fiction. On a 9mm pistol with subsonic ammo, You're looking at 125 to 135 decibels, quieter than unsuppressed, but still loud enough that neighbors within 100 yards will hear it. On a 5.56 rifle with supersonic ammo, the suppressor brings the blast down to about 135 to 145 decibels. But the supersonic crack remains, and the gun is still unmistakably a gun. Real suppressors are made from high-grade stainless steel, titanium, Inconel, or Statolite. The baffles are CNC machined to precise tolerances to control gas flow. The materials are chosen to withstand extreme heat, extreme pressure, and corrosive carbon fouling over tens of thousands of rounds. A quality suppressor will last 100,000 rounds or more, depending on caliber and rate of fire. They are designed, tested, and warrantied by engineers who understand fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, and materials science. An oil filter is designed for 10 psi of hydraulic pressure and 225 degrees Fahrenheit oil temperature in an automotive engine. It is not designed for 60,000 psi and 1500 degrees. The filter media, paper or synthetic pleats, ignites instantly when exposed to propellant gases. The metal canister is thin stamped steel, often less than a millimeter thick, and it deforms, tears, or ruptures under the pressure and heat of even a single gunshot. The internal structure provides zero effective baffling because the gas bypasses the media entirely. There's no turbulence, no controlled expansion, just a straight path through a tube that's partially filled with flaming paper. The sound reduction is negligible. In my testing across multiple calibers and filter types, the average reduction was 3 to 8 decibels. The human ear perceives a 10 decibel reduction as roughly half as loud. 3 to 8 decibels is barely noticeable. You go from incredibly loud gunshot to slightly less incredibly loud gunshot. An adversary 100 yards away hears nearly the same volume. The idea that this grants you stealth is absurd, and the filter doesn't last. On 22LR, the cheapest and lowest pressure cartridge I tested, a standard automotive oil filter, survived about 10 rounds before the media was completely incinerated and the canister split lengthwise. On 9mm, a heavy-duty diesel filter lasted 3 rounds before catastrophic rupture. On 5.56, an aftermarket aluminum solvent trap tube, marketed online as a fuel filter but clearly designed for this purpose, experienced a baffle strike on the 3rd round when the bullet grazed the inside wall, causing the tube to deform and the bullet to keyhole. The accuracy went from 1.3 MOA to 5.2 MOA. I stopped the test because continuing was unsafe. On 308, the filter exploded on the first shot. The canister ruptured, metal fragments sprayed in multiple directions, and the sound measurement was meaningless because the blast was uncontained. I have high-speed footage of these failures. You can watch the filter canister bulge outward as the gas pressure deforms the metal. You can see the paper media ignite, embers and sparks ejecting from the muzzle, smoke trailing. You can see the moment a baffle strike occurs. The bullet impacts the inside of the tube bends, the bullet exits at an angle and tumbles downrange, keyholing through the target. You can see threads stripping tests, and in the case of the 308 test, you can see the entire device disintegrate in a shower of shrapnel. This is not a suppressor. This is a pipe bomb you've attached to your gun. Now, compare that to a real suppressor. I tested a Silencer Co. Omega 36M, a modular multi-caliber rifle suppressor rated for everything from 5.46 to 300 Win Mag. On the same 5.56 AR-15 I tested the solvent trap on, the Omega reduced the sound by 23 dB, from 165 dB to the supersonic crack remained, so it wasn't Hollywood quiet, but the muzzle blast was dramatically reduced. There was no muzzle flash. The accuracy shifted by 0.2 MOA, essentially unchanged. I fired 200 rounds in that session. The suppressor was warm to the touch afterward, but undamaged. Silencer Co. rates the Omega for over 30,000 rounds of full auto fire on 5.56. I could shoot that suppressor every weekend for the rest of my life and never wear it out. On 22LR subsonic with a Silencer Co. Sparrow, the sound dropped from 142 decibels to 113. That's hearing safe. That's the quietest gunfire gets in the real world, and it's still louder than a conversation. It's about as loud as a nail gun or a loud hand clap. It doesn't sound like a gunshot to an untrained ear at a distance, but it's not silent. You are not a ghost. You are not invisible. You're just less likely to go permanently deaf. The cost comparison is stark. An oil filter suppressor costs $8 to $60 and lasts 1 to 10 rounds. That's 80 cents to $60 per round. A real suppressor costs $600 to $1,400 plus a $200 tax stamp, let's say $1,600 total, and lasts 100,000 rounds. That's 0.016 cents per round. The real suppressor is 400 times more cost effective, infinitely more effective at actually suppressing sound, and legal. The oil filter is a felony that fails immediately. This is not a difficult choice. Let's address the tactical fantasy, because even if oil filters worked and were legal, the Hollywood silent kill scenario is a myth. You've been conditioned by decades of cinema to believe that a suppressed gun allows you to eliminate threats without alerting anyone nearby. Jason Bourne shoots a guard in a crowded plaza. The suppressor muffles the shot to a whisper. Nobody turns around. John Wick fires a suppressed pistol in a subway station during rush hour, drops a target, walks away, and the crowd doesn't react. James Bond screws a suppressor onto his PPK, shoots the bad guy through a pillow, and the sound is a muffled cough. It's fiction. Even the best suppressor with the best subsonic ammunition produces sound in the 110 to 135 decibel range, roughly the volume of a jackhammer, a chainsaw, an ambulance siren at close range, or a loud rock concert. People within 50 to 100 yards will absolutely hear it. They may not immediately identify it as a gunshot if they're untrained or if there's ambient noise, but they will hear a loud, sharp report. They will turn. They will investigate. They will call the police. Trained adversaries, military, law enforcement, experienced criminals will identify suppressed gunfire instantly.
They've heard it before.
They know the signature, and they will return fire. The idea that you're going to conduct a stealth ambush in a populated area with a suppressed firearm is a video game fantasy that will get you killed or captured. If you're firing supersonic ammunition, and most rifle ammo is supersonic, as are many pistol loads, the suppressor does nothing to eliminate the sonic crack of the bullet breaking the sound barrier. That crack is loud, sharp, and unmistakable. It sounds exactly like a gunshot because it is a gunshot. The suppressor reduces the muzzle blast, but the crack dominates the sound signature. A suppressed 5.56 rifle firing standard M855 ball ammo is still 140 to 150 decibels, even with a high-end suppressor. That is not quiet. That is a gunshot. And let's talk about all the other noise involved in using a firearm. Racking the slide on a pistol, dropping a magazine, brass casings hitting concrete, footsteps, your breathing if you're moving fast, the target screaming, falling, or returning fire, doors opening, glass breaking, furniture being knocked over. Gunfire is one component of a loud, chaotic event. Suppressing your muzzle blast by 20 decibels does not make you a ninja. It makes you slightly less loud in an already loud situation. The tactical value of suppressors in military and law enforcement contexts is real, but it's not about stealth kills. It's about hearing protection, allowing operators to communicate without electronic ear protection, reducing cumulative hearing damage over thousands of training rounds and operational shots. It's about reducing muzzle flash, so you're harder to spot at night. It's about recoil reduction and muzzle rise mitigation, which improves accuracy and speed on follow-up shots. It's about psychological disruption. Suppressed fire is harder for an enemy to localize by sound, which creates confusion in an ambush scenario. But none of that equals invisibility. A suppressed rifle team conducting a nighttime raid is still loud. The enemy hears the shots, they just have a harder time pinpointing the exact location in the dark, and the operators aren't going deaf from their own muzzle blast. That's the value, not Hollywood silence. For preppers, the fantasy goes like this. SHTF happens, you're hunting deer to feed your family. You fire a suppressed rifle so you don't alert other survivors in the area to your location or the fact that you have game. Or you're defending your property. You fire a suppressed pistol so neighbors don't hear and come investigating or calling non-existent police. Or you're moving through a hostile area and you need to eliminate a threat silently. All of these scenarios are flawed. A suppressed rifle shot is still audible for 1 to 2 miles in quiet rural terrain. A single shot might not be immediately identified as gunfire by distant listeners, but if you're hunting, you're probably firing multiple shots, follow-ups, missed shots, others in your group shooting. The pattern becomes recognizable. People figure it out. And sound travels. In a post-collapse environment where ambient noise is lower, no traffic, no industrial hum, no airplanes, gunfire carries farther and stands out more. You're not hiding, you're advertising. In a home defense scenario, the gunfight itself is loud. Multiple shots, the attacker shooting back or yelling, your family screaming, doors splintering, glass breaking. A suppressor reduces your muzzle blast from 160 decibels to 135. Neighbors still hear the chaos. The suppressor doesn't hide a gunfight. It just makes it slightly less deafening for you. And the idea of moving through hostile territory, silently eliminating threats, is a tactical fantasy that requires skills 90 to 9% of preppers don't have. You're not a Navy SEAL. You haven't trained for close quarters battle. You haven't rehearsed room clearing or silent movement or rapid target engagement under stress. Suppressors do not grant you video game stealth mode. They are one piece of equipment in a complex skill set you likely don't possess. If stealth is your goal, the correct answer is to avoid gunfire entirely. Use evasion, concealment, negotiation, or retreat. If you must shoot, the suppressor is 5% of the equation. Sound discipline, movement discipline, situational awareness, and marksmanship matter far more. The suppressor is the least important part of staying undetected, and if you're betting your survival on an $8 oil filter making you invisible, you've already lost. Now let's talk about how the ATF catches people, because the enforcement is more aggressive and sophisticated than preppers realize. The ATF monitors online marketplaces, eBay, Amazon, Wish, Etsy, gun forums, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, using keyword alerts and web scraping. They search for terms like solvent trap, fuel filter adapter, threaded oil filter, suppressor kit, freeze plug, and dozens of variations. When they identify sellers, they run undercover buy operations, or they shut the seller down and subpoena purchase records. Between 2019 and 2021, the ATF executed a massive crackdown on solvent trap vendors. More than 20 major sellers were raided. Customer lists with tens of thousands of names were subpoenaed. The ATF sent letters to buyers. We are aware you purchased item X from vendor Y. If you possess an unregistered suppressor, you are in violation of federal law. You may surrender the device voluntarily, or you may be subject to prosecution. Hundreds of buyers panicked. Some surrendered devices and avoided charges. Some destroyed evidence, which is risky if the ATF already has proof of possession through photos, videos, or testimony. Some lawyered up immediately, which is expensive but smart. Some ignored the letter, which was a catastrophic mistake. Dozens were prosecuted. Social media posts are a goldmine for the ATF. YouTube videos, Instagram photos, TikTok clips, Facebook posts showing homemade suppressors. Even if your face is hidden, metadata embeds location, device information, timestamps, background details in photos. A visible street sign, a license plate, a storefront, a unique piece of furniture can be cross-referenced. Linked accounts reveal identity. The ATF has dedicated cyber investigation units. Some arrests stem directly from viral posts. If you posted a video of your oil filter suppressor test even years ago, even on a private account, you are at risk. The ATF also relies on tips. Disgruntled ex-partners, feuding neighbors, range safety officers who see something suspicious, gun store employees who overhear conversations, people snitch. Sometimes out of genuine concern for public safety, sometimes out of spite, sometimes because they're cooperating witnesses in their own cases and the ATF offers reduced sentences for information leading to other arrests. Online forums are not safe. Some have undercover ATF agents or informants. After a bust, agents flip defendants to inform on suppliers, customers, or co-conspirators. If you discussed building a suppressor online, even in a private group, assume someone in that group is or will become a cooperating witness. Traffic stops and unrelated searches are another vector. If you're pulled over and your vehicle is searched, if you're on probation or parole and subject to home searches, if police respond to a domestic disturbance or noise complaint and see something suspicious they call ATF, some cases start as drug investigations, domestic violence arrests, or unrelated warrant executions, and an oil filter suppressor is discovered incidentally. That's a separate federal charge stacked on top of whatever else you're facing. The SD Tactical takedown is the textbook case. SD Tactical and similar vendors sold solvent traps on platforms like eBay and standalone websites. The products were imported from China, rebranded and marketed with plausible deniability for cleaning purposes only, not a suppressor. But they included drilling jigs, instructions, and baffle designs clearly intended for suppressor conversion. The ATF ran undercover purchases, determined the kits were designed for illegal conversion under the constructive intent doctrine, and executed coordinated federal search warrants on SD Tactical and over 20 similar vendors. They seized customer records, Tens of thousands of buyers were identified. The ATF sent warning letters. Hundreds complied. 30 or more were prosecuted, those who had posted online evidence, those caught in other crimes while possessing the devices, those who lied to agents during interviews. Doubles from 5%. Sentences ranged from 12 to 60 months. The message was clear. The ATF knows who you are, they know what you bought, and they will prosecute. If the ATF visits your home for a knock and talk, you are under investigation. This is not a friendly chat. They are gathering evidence. The most important thing you can do is refuse to consent to a search. Politely but firmly. I do not consent to searches. Am I free to go? I'd like to speak to an attorney. Do not let them inside. Do not let them look around. Do not answer questions. Anything you say will be used against you. I was just researching is an admission of intent. I bought it but never used it is an admission of possession. Both are felonies. Invoke your right to remain silent and your right to an attorney, and then actually remain silent. Contact a lawyer immediately, preferably one specializing in NFA cases. If you consent to a search, you've waived your Fourth Amendment rights. If they find the device, you will be arrested. The case against you will be overwhelming. You will plead guilty. You will go to prison. The alternative, the legal path, is straightforward. Find a suppressor you want, visit a Class 3 dealer, or order online through a site like Silencer Shop. Pay the dealer. File your Form 4 electronically through the ATF's e-form system. Submit fingerprints and photos digitally at a kiosk or via your dealer system. Notify your local chief law enforcement officer by mailing a copy of the form. This is informational only, not an approval step. Pay the $200 tax stamp. Wait 90 to 180 days for approval. Pick up your suppressor. Keep your approved Form 4 with the suppressor at all times. You are now a legal suppressor owner in one of 42 states that allow them. The process is boring. It requires patience. But it's legal. You can also file a Form 1 to manufacture your own suppressor if you have machining skills and tools. The approval is faster, 30 to 90 days for electronic Form 1 submissions, and the cost is lower if you can fabricate the parts yourself. But you must file the Form 1 and receive approval before you build anything. You must engrave the finished suppressor with your name, or trust name, city, state, and a serial number per ATF regulations. If you screw up the design, you've wasted time and money and possibly created a dangerous device that will cause a baffle strike or overpressure failure. There's no warranty, no technical support, no company backing the product. For most people, buying a commercial suppressor is smarter. An NFA trust is an option if you want multiple people, spouse, adult children, shooting partners to legally possess your suppressors. The trust owns the NFA items, and anyone named as a responsible person in the trust can use them. This also simplifies estate planning. When you die, the suppressors transfer to your beneficiaries without additional ATF paperwork. Dejan, the downside is upfront cost. A gun trust, drafted by an attorney, runs $100 to $500. And every responsible person must submit fingerprints and photos, which adds complexity. DIY trusts from online templates are risky. Legal errors can invalidate the trust or create NFA violations. Use an attorney who specializes in gun trusts and NFA law. The cost-benefit analysis is not close. A legal suppressor runs $800 to $1,600 total, lasts a lifetime, provides real sound reduction and hearing protection, and carries zero legal risk. An oil filter suppressor costs $15 to $60, lasts 1 to 10 rounds, provides negligible sound reduction, and carries a 10-year federal prison sentence, a $250,000 fine, loss of all firearms, loss of gun rights forever, and the destruction of your family, career, and future. When you account for legal risk, the oil filter is infinitely more expensive. This is not a shortcut. It's a trap door. And the myth persists because of psychology. Preppers distrust the government. They see the NFA as tyranny. They believe forbidden knowledge is being suppressed. They don't want you to know this trick because it's cheap and effective. Confirmation bias kicks in. Once you believe the myth, you seek information that supports it and dismiss information that contradicts it. ATF warnings are propaganda. Physics explanations are shilling for suppressor companies. Arrest reports are fake or isolated incidents. You've entered an echo chamber. Normalcy bias tells you it won't happen to me. The Dunning-Kruger effect convinces you that watching a 10-minute video makes you competent to build a device that requires material science and engineering expertise. And so the myth spreads. It jumps from forum to forum, from father to son, from prepper to prepper, and people keep building these things, keep getting arrested, keep going to prison. The myth is self-perpetuating because the people who discover it's false the hard way are incarcerated and can't warn others. The survivors who never got caught stay silent out of fear or shame. The only voices left are the myth believers, and they keep shouting into the void. But every arrest for an oil filter suppressor hands ammunition to gun control advocates. See? Gun owners are felons.
We need more restrictions. It undermines Second Amendment advocacy.
It damages efforts to remove suppressors from the NFA entirely. Legislation like the Hearing Protection Act, which would treat suppressors as ordinary firearm accessories requiring only a standard NICS background check at purchase, no tax stamp, no weight, that bill has been introduced multiple times and has failed every time, partly because of the stigma around suppressors as assassin tools rather than safety equipment. Every YouTube video of a homemade suppressor, every arrest, every news story reinforces that stigma. If you care about gun rights, if you want suppressors to be deregulated, the absolute worst thing you can do is build an illegal one. You're poisoning the well for everyone. The path forward is education. Share this information. Post it in forums, in Facebook groups, in subreddits. Counter the misinformation with evidence, test data, case law, arrest reports, physics explanations. When you see someone talking about building an oil filter suppressor, don't mock them. Warn them. Show them the consequences. Peer pressure works. Experienced gun owners and preppers have a responsibility to call out dangerous myths in their communities. Don't be the person who stays silent while someone you know commits a felony out of ignorance. And advocate for NFA reform. Contact your representatives. Ask them to co-sponsor the Hearing Protection Act or similar legislation. Suppressors should be treated like muzzle brakes or flash hiders, safety accessories, not regulated weapons. They don't make guns more dangerous. They make shooting safer and less disruptive. The NFA classification is a relic of 1930s gangster-era fearmongering. It's time to change the law. But until the law changes, you comply. You register, you wait, you pay the tax, you do it legally, or you don't do it at all. Hollywood sold you a lie. The internet weaponized your ignorance. Conspiracy thinking and confirmation bias turned a movie trope into a felony factory. I've shown you the evidence. I've tested the devices. I've documented the failures. I've explained the law. I've given you the case examples, the physics, the tactical reality, the enforcement mechanisms, and the legal path. You now know more about oil filter suppressors than 90% of preppers, and what you know should terrify you. Because this myth is not harmless. It's not a thought experiment. It's a trap that has destroyed lives, families, and freedom. If you've built one, disassemble it, destroy it, and consult an attorney immediately. If you've thought about building one, stop. If you know someone who believes the myth, send them this. The stakes are your life, your liberty, and everything you've worked for. There is no shortcut to a legal suppressor. There is no loophole. There is no emergency exemption. There is only compliance or catastrophe. Choose carefully. Your future depends on it.